In this real side experience, I would find myself in a car, sitting in the front seat beside the driver, and accelerating through random, undisclosed as to our exact location, streets and cities, though impressions revealed this was the planet Earth. There was certainly a sense of urgency by virtue of the haste by which we were proceeding. In creation, physical level, and real side other dimensionally, through the design of the consciousness, the agreement ideas it comprises of, as to its construct, will be effected the various decided and created means and mechanisms of transportation, be they the spacecraft, the portals, or conventional ground-based vehicles. Anything is possible in a cause and effect creation. It simply needs be formulated as an idea, consciousness installed, and then effected into a simulated reality. And oftentimes on the real side, we may make use of such a consciousness effected means of motion from point to point, though through the real awareness can we have our simulated forms and body form avatars inserted into any creational situation, as the real awareness is a part of the isness everything reality that is through all consciousness, and so every idea that effects as a simulated life level, dimension, situation and circumstance is available and accessible to the real awareness. No vehicles, spacecraft or portals are necessary. However, the real side is not always as it literally seems to be, and symbolically any vehicle, a car as an example, can represent ideas, and that as we may find ourselves travelling within the cars, so we are in agreement with the ideas the cars or any other transportation vehicle represents. The individual behind the wheel would be then the creator of the idea, driving the cause to its effect. All other passengers present would be then in agreement with the idea that was conceived and created by the driver, that the car he is driving represents, as I said. It pays then to be aware of who is at the wheel, were such a car journeys purely representational, for we surely would not wish to be agreeing with an idea that is the creation of an ill-intended dark force reptilian, for example. In actuality, it was my current lifetime father who was driving the car at a breakneck pace, and impressions suggested this was indeed the genuine individual, and not, as can often be the case, a real guide assuming his form. So were this a symbolic or literal, regardless, I was still in agreement with him, by virtue of my being agreeable to being transported to wherever it was he was taking me. Impressions revealed that the entire planet Earth had been subjected to a curious rift in time and frequency, as though moved out of a phase from the dimensional frequency it was in, and indeed shifted to an alternative timeline. Although, in reality, time and space are illusory, and are only realities through the consciousness design which affects body types that process ideas in sequences of time and space frames, and what each individual or species is experiencing at any given moment is simply where the agreements they hold to most prominently lie that affect their current circumstances. Experiences other than those present in each moment, but where retained is the memory reference of these other experiences, from the personal self perspective would be construed as the past, and that which is yet to be experienced, the idea agreements yet to be processed through the consciousness mechanics, but that are in effect now also in actuality, would be considered the future, etc. And so, the Earth had been displaced somewhat. It no longer occupied the same prior frequency or timeline position. Something had transpired where the current moment in the experience for the Earth and all humanity was other than what it would have been. An altogether different idea agreement had assumed a prominence within overall human consciousness, and effecting this dimensional frequency time displacement event. The visual evidence for this seemed to be with the very skies, for impressions aside as to this occurrence, every sky of the earth was of an exotic coloration, a combination of purples, greens, yellows, very vibrant, and were it not for the seriousness of this situation, would have been quite the spectacle to behold. As we proceeded, we would also be passing through various and very apparent purple portals that seemed now prevalent throughout the earth. Passing through them made no alteration to our course or creational position. They simply were there, the car speeding through them as we continued on. Seemingly then, they were just another feature of this earth frequency and time displacement, and perhaps as moments pass, they would be impacting in some way, or present as conduits that may be connected to other dimensional positions, though this wasn't made apparent, mere speculation on my part. Our journey would terminate at a kind of a military checkpoint, and further impressions revealed that this displacement event had caused widespread panic, disorder, and social unrest. The world transitioned into a more military-controlled situation, as though the decided response for this event was for martial law to be established globally, and far more rigid restriction put in place, including these frequent and regularly placed checkpoints. It seemed that more limited now was the extent to which humans could travel, vast areas of the earth cordoned off, and where such military posts were stationed to ensure no human unauthorized could enter. It was then revealed that certain areas of the earth were affected through this displacement event in such a way that it was deemed unfit for human habitation, and necessary was it that these areas be regulated and policed. What the displacement frequency event had resulted in were certain areas impacted adversely, becoming the forbidden zones, whereas the rest of the earth was generally unaffected, besides the emergence of portals that currently served no purpose, and the skies altered in their coloration, but where the areas which still were safe would eventually catch up and become as the no-go areas were. But it seems my father desired to cross this military checkpoint into the forbidden area beyond, with me accompanying him, as we appeared to be on an assignment which involved us accessing one of the areas the military were denying the general populace. My father was addressed as a high-ranking military officer with the credentials and documents verifying his authenticity, similar to real-side experiences I have previously shared, where our accessing throughout multi-dimensional creation is made possible through the real awareness, what with its oversight of everything creational and unlimited ability where its simulated forms are concerned, where we can successfully be inserted into any situation, our outer forms can be altered, our documentation provided, all the information we require that our assignments be executed successfully. My father then, still retaining intent with the ears enough that he was participating in this assignment, one that impressions revealed was made so through intentionality to operate in life and awareness beneficial ways. But despite the identification he produced, it seems at first the military guards were still reluctant to allow him access, as though he lacked some essential document that would ensure access be granted. After much deliberation, the military guards allowed him to pass through their checkpoint, although it seemed that throughout this they were not even aware of my presence, as though a more reliable and assured means of bypassing the checkpoint was simply to render one's self indiscernible to the very awareness-lacking, perceptually limited guards. And I would accompany my father, I only would be visible to him, and now we found ourselves in what appeared to be a wasteland. Impressions now revealed that this frequency-time displacement had positioned the Earth now that the overall human experience was a kind of apocalyptic situation, an apocalyptic event that was globally encompassing, rendering the planet as a desert wasteland, but as though it was taking a few moments for the Earth to fully phase into this overall effect, that certain areas of it were there now, and others had to catch up in a sense, as though parts of the Earth were experiencing a delay factor, but would get there in due course, and then the entirety of the Earth be as this apocalyptic situation. Waiting for my father and I in this apocalyptic area would be my grandfather, but in this case, impressions would reveal this was a guide assuming his form. Standing with the guide would be what impressions revealed were my mother and two siblings. I say impressions, for this was my mother, sister, and brother, but looked entirely different body form-wise to my actual mother and siblings in my current lifetime and position, that due to the Earth being gradually displaced into this apocalyptic effect, also were other anomalies manifesting, including seemingly alternative dimensional family members. And although only through impressions would I then realize these were my family, but only in the dimension the Earth now resided within, they would recognize me through my simulated form, a form that unlike them was the same as it had been. For they were, as my current mother and siblings are, one-dimensionally personal self-immersed. No impressions from a real awareness they retained detachment from would they be afforded. The guide would announce that only one sibling could proceed with my father for whatever business we had in one of the apocalyptic areas. The mother and the other siblings would have to remain. At that moment, I would volunteer that I remain, stating that through my real awareness standing, I would be better equipped and capable of surviving in the apocalyptic desert the entire Earth would soon become, and whatever else would be manifested, the portals perhaps that would begin to allow access to who knew what onto the Earth, etc. The guide would insist that I must proceed with my father and accompany him. For it is so that as we begin to release attachment and agreement to the consciousness, we afford ourselves more options and opportunities. For the rigid, convoluted distortion that all consciousness has become effects extreme limitation and restriction of creational positioning, with the limited ideas of the consciousness progressively released, so we become less resigned to only certain areas of creation. In this situation and overall humanity and Earth potential scenario, it is through the collective human consciousness that such circumstances are effected, as nothing can transpire individually or collectively as a species without the agreements that effect facilitate such to be. And for the consciousness personal self-immersed human then, less options are available through virtue of they deciding the limitations which prevent alternative options to be available for them. My alternative mother and the other siblings being personal self-immersed as they were, they are then resigned to this Earth displacement event, as they are in full agreement with the overall human consciousness, which in this experience was holding to this apocalyptic idea event as its prominent agreement. For it is the prominent agreements amongst all those in a consciousness which will come to pass on the physical if maintained long enough, this potential event then being but one possibility. And so, despite my offering to remain on the soon-to-be fully apocalyptic style desert Earth, my other siblings still could not proceed through the consciousness they held to that affected them as participants in this event, and so little sense was it to volunteer myself to stay behind. And so I would join the guide and my father, my alternative mother and siblings unable to accompany us by virtue of them denying themselves in actuality. Before we embarked on a trek through the desert of the apocalyptic area we had entered, I would mention to the guide and my father that it was different this time, that this event was as an agreement rattling around overall human consciousness, but that it had been recently altered, an extra element added to it, that no impressions or indication had revealed what had caused the Earth to be displaced into this alternative dimension and event, if it had been a dark force instigated, or the conception by the hand of other beings, or was an accidental unseen occurrence, but overall, evidently, it wasn't especially life and awareness beneficial, other than perhaps serving as a severe means by which the comfort zones of all humans could be shattered, and rather forcing the necessity of considering something else aside from them. But the additional element or idea recently, as though incorporated into the overall idea that was this event, again made possible through agreement to this additional idea that it could also feature, was that a vast space fleet of various alien beings and body types, although not responsible for the event, were involved in some way and represented a threat now to all humans, as the humans would be forced to attempt to survive on a desolate planet devoid of anything living, a desert wasteland, as I said. I can't verify if this was the alien armada intended to originally serve in a beneficial waking up of humanity capacity, as impressions were not forthcoming, only that it was similarly as a large fleet of assorted beings and body types that either were then an ill-intended fleet, or perhaps the potentiality that the actual stepping up alien armada fleet had done a complete U-turn in their intentionality from life beneficial to destructive. For all potentialities and possibilities will be present in a consciousness, and which becomes so are really those held to and maintained, including intent, choice and action. But it was as though, if this were the beneficial fleet turned bad, that perhaps somehow it was this Earth displacement event that had caused this to be, as though a dark force instigated dimensional frequency shift situation that had in some way tainted the consciousness of all the species of the alien armada, if indeed it was the alien armada that has been intending to assist humanity and not another altogether separate fleet. Again, I am uncertain which option, but one fact held sway, that a vast alien armada fleet was now presenting as a threat to the humans that would have to survive on the Earth as it fully phased into this apocalyptic position. And so, as the guide, my father and I proceeded through the desert, we would be joined by more individuals that impressions revealed were those also stepping up and on their awareness processes. Appearance-wise, they were human, but exceptionally large, standing 7 to 8 feet tall and sporting very muscular frames. And as we continued on, it was as though we all phased from the current dimensional agreement affecting Earth position we were in to a moment just prior to when this displacement event began. We would be now in a very rich area, a street or other, approaching a very large and expensive-looking high-rise multi-floored building. I would proceed alone at this point, and would be stopped at the entrance by a security guard. I would inform him that the individual whose building this was, and indeed, as impressions suggested, was a very powerful and influential and highly positioned being within the dark force Earth-based control systems, was expecting me. The guard would request of my name, and on providing it, he would acknowledge that I was indeed expected. They would request that I remove my shoes and a coat before continuing on to my audience with this powerful dark force character. The security guard would grumble that this was a cutting into what should be his free time. His shift apparently had ended at the moment I had walked in. During the experience, impressions afforded the name of the powerful being I was to engage with, but I was unable to bring it back to the physical on waking. Impressions also suggested that this particular powerful dark force character was a key component and a factor in the Earth displacement event, as though through his actions and direction was such instigated with the agreements implanted in human consciousness that would allow it to shortly be initiated. My business then was to attempt to persuade this individual, and maybe others also involved, to choose differently through whichever creative means this might be, and whatever might be offered or proposed as an alternative, which, if I was successful, would remove this particular agreement from human consciousness, that one less and very dastardly overall human idea be no longer present in human consciousness as a potentiality. But were the attempted negotiations with this powerful character to fail, then this displacement event would remain as a possibility, but only can become as a physical level actualized if it is maintained as the most prominent agreement long enough, that this then becomes the overall human experience. So, as always, with every experience, individual and collective species-wise, being based on agreement, it remains to be seen what of all the possibilities come to pass.